And they're even now promoting that the only gap we have in I-49 connecting, they say Lafayette and Winnipeg, is this 3.5 mile stretch. Which is a lie, because we know there's hundreds of miles in Arkansas, and and it's just, I guess they have made a cartoon television advertisement, reflecting that issue.
So, Norm, I have a question. And what, with the new Secretary of Transportation now, and the new president of office, but we have Pete Buttigieg in office, and they are really pushing the notion of stop building through neighborhoods, pretty much, right? What do you see any recent policy changes that may start to change or get away from, I think, what you call the transportation industrial complex, right? Do you see this new Secretary of Transportation kind of moving the needle towards smarter, more cost-effective, and basically better modeling in the industry? Or do you see it as soon as he leaves, it just tilting right back?
Well, it is a breath of fresh air.
Okay.
But yeah, the DOTs have a long history of waiting people out. If you have a governor who's in your way, or a mayor who's in your way, or even a president in your way, this project, I guess even since it got renewed, it's been going on about 10 years. I mean, these are kind of long-term things. Whether the whole direction can be changed, it's a little bit too soon to say, I think. There had been some, unfortunately, it was too late in the Obama administration, but there was the secretary talking about these issues at the end of the Obama administration. Obviously, when Trump came in, that initiative got dropped. And so we'll see what happens. I know people are, a number of groups I'm working with around the country are writing letters to Mayor Pete, and but I don't know. He's got, I'm sure, a lot on his plate, particularly with the whole stimulus bill up right now, and we'll see. At least it is a breath of fresh air, and I think the intervention, I haven't studied it, but the intervention they did in Houston, where I think is significant, because Houston's one of the states, I don't know if this is true of Louisiana, but Texas is one of the states where the federal government has given their money of their regulatory rolls over to the state to TxDOT. So when you have an environmental impact statement, traditionally, and still in large parts of the country, the Federal Highway Administration will be the sort of reviewer. And if you sue the environmental impact statement, you're actually suing Federal Highway, and therefore they're in the middle of it. But I forget which amendment it was to the law that enabled states to take that on. So if you sue an EIS in Texas now, you're suing TxDOT, not the Federal Highway Administration. But nevertheless, the federal government did step in with some concern on this project and put a hold on it. So it's certainly possible.
Norm, that reminds me that, that what's going on in Houston, the city politicians and civic and business leadership is also involved in suing TxDOT, which my view is that made it pretty easy for Secretary Buttigieg to step in and say, TxDOT, stop this project till we do our civil rights investigation. But I also noticed that you did work for Little Rock.
Yes.
And that the civic and business leadership in Little Rock has been very strong in trying to prevent the highway widening project over the Arkansas River. And I'm longing for that kind of civic leadership in Shreveport.
Actually, they haven't had nearly enough support from the powers that be in Little Rock.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of those where they feel like that's the best they're going to get. You know, I sat down and tried to convince the mayor a few years ago to oppose it, and he wouldn't. And it's really, you know, and people are used to getting these crumbs. So what they're getting in Little Rock is they're getting a public park under a 12-lane elevated highway.
Wow. So
And meanwhile,
Norm,
they're getting a little bit of land back because they're going to close one ramp. But the problem is, by doubling the amount of traffic going through there and closing one of the ramps, the remaining ramp is just going to be a fire hose of traffic that the city grid can't handle. And I analyzed that and showed it to them. So it's a really bad project. That's still in court.
Yeah. Yeah, at
okay.
least it's in court. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a question. Hi, Norm. I'm Dorothy Wiley, and I'm the president of Allendale Strong. First, I just want to say thank you for, you know, just taking time out of your busy schedule to inform us. And, you know, that way we can get a better understanding of these needed policy changes and modeling. I am nowhere near understanding a lot of this transportation stuff that's going on, but because Allendale Strong is a learning and doing community, I am getting some of this stuff down in me. So again, you know, for whomever will be listening to this podcast, and I just believe that a lot of our leaders really don't understand transportation and what's going on, or these decision makers are, you know, just putting information out there. But I did hear you say that what I want to know, can a bill be started if Buttigieg is saying no more freeways through our Black and brown communities? Can our leaders start this, NL Conk start this bill with them already knowing that this has to be on hold, or will they wait it out to see what will happen? I mean, I'm just trying to, you know, because every time I hear one of our leaders on the TV saying we're shovel ready, you know, so you might be shovel ready, but even as Kim Mitchell said, that our some of our business leaders are, you know, collecting all this money, you know, to promote this. Can they start this with what our Secretary of Transportation is saying and what the president is saying? Can they start it?
Unfortunately, I think yes. The relationship between the state DOTs and the U.S. Department of Transportation has been, you know, it hasn't been a strong top-down relationship. The DOTs are mostly been in the driver's seat. And what I have heard sometimes is a person at DOT will try and say, well, you know, when we've been asking for something smaller or something, they'll say something like, Federal Highway wouldn't let us do that. Federal Highway absolutely would let them do that. You know, this is a little bit like when you go to the car dealer, they sort of talk about their sales manager or something. I mean, there's no, Federal Highways never really told the DOTs what to do. There's a group called AASHTO, that's the Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. It's very powerful. You know, I had, you know, I submitted comments in Austin recently to the DOT, and the DOT came back and said, we're going to follow FHWA modeling guidance. And I just wrote back and said, there is no FHWA modeling guidance.
Wow.
You might be able to tell that to your, you know, suckers locally, but, you know, there is no such thing. So, so yeah, will the feds get, so the feds have not been managing this process historically.
Okay.
And for them to do so now would obviously engage them in a lot of local political battles that they may just not want to get involved in. So they're probably going to pick their fights.
Well, let me ask you this thing. Excuse me, Kim. Well, what is the purpose of the justification report if in the beginning you're saying, okay, transportation going to do what they want to do because they've always been doing this. They're looking at getting paid this big money and they don't have to choose the right thing. They can always use, I'm going to say that, the stat modeling. So what is the purpose of the justification report? Why are we going through that if they choose to do what they want to do?
Well, it's largely for the political leaders and the business leaders. Those are really the audiences for that justification report.
You know, Norm, you mentioned something that's important, and I wanted to get back to it. That from, I guess this comes from NEPA, but they really should be looking at all the reasonable alternatives.
Yes.
And we've been frustrated since 2012 in consistently trying to ask them to look at the business boulevard, or a combination, the business boulevard and a loop around a concept that we should, to get the best for our city, we should separate local traffic from through traffic. And so we kind of latched on to the learning from other places about, you know, business boulevard alternatives. So we see that if we use the loop for through traffic, and then we construct the business boulevard that would really utilize an existing US highway, state highway combination we call Market Street, that would make sense. And when we asked for that, what we're told, and we were told this by the consultant, is that they can't do that because they were contracted for a freeway solution.
Yes.
And so I'd really like to, you know, hear you just comment about the reasonableness of what we're proposing. And then also, this is really aiming at when you feel we're at a time that we can contract with you to do this work. What would be your approach in evaluating the boulevard loop combination versus the options that they are currently considering?
So I think it's a very valid approach, and unlike the freeway ideas where they just sort of wave their hands and say somehow it creates economic development, you know, whenever, you know, people in the Congress from the urbanism think about a boulevard, they're always thinking about creating economic value right on it. I mean, and this is the way that Chuck Maroon thinks too, is that everything you invest in ought to have a return right in its own neighborhood. It shouldn't be some sort of hypothetical. And so I think it is a very valid approach. And then, but in addition to the, oh, and what you mentioned about, yeah, we were contracted to study a freeway. That's the kind of thing lawyers can work with if in a NEPA lawsuit, because, all right, you know, this is bias right from the beginning. You know, that's the kind of thing that it's useful to tell a judge. But in terms of modeling, and also they don't have their static model can't evaluate a boulevard. It'll always shift the traffic onto the freeway anyway. You know, I did a project in Utah in Salt Lake City area where they kept saying, well, we can't build a parallel. They had congestion on their freeway, and they said, well, we can't solve anything by building a 50-mile-an-hour parallel arterial because the model just says everybody will stay on the freeway anyway, even though it's over capacity. That just basically says you have a bad model. But instead of concluding you have a bad model, they conclude, well, we'll just stop thinking about arterials and we'll only think about freeways. And that's how stupid this field really is. But I mean, if you tell that to like a mayor, they're not going to believe that. They're going to think that the DOT has smart people in it and the consultants these are like multinational companies, engineering companies, you know, they're not going to think what they're doing is just really stupid, but that's really the reality. That's why I haven't kind of found the right venue yet, but what I really would want to get to, and I've been trying to do this in Austin because I know they have a lot of these people, is get in front of some young, smart tech people and get them to understand what's going on and see if they can talk to their bosses and because really it's really stupid computer science. And I don't know if you have much of a tech industry in your area, but those are people I want to reach, because I think they could help kind of break through some of this.
Well, that's great inspiration for us. And I think Roosevelt, that's your skill and gift, isn't it? Is information technology and what you.
Yeah. I mean, I like I said, I work at Georgia Tech, so that sounds like a great graduate project for somebody that I can go and talk to somebody at the civil engineering school there, that may be a good idea for a podcast topic, right?
Yeah. No, I think that, so, if Georgia Tech, I think, has a pretty big program.
Yeah.
Transportation. And I don't know, I haven't seen a lot of innovative stuff coming out of it recently, but maybe there is some. But, if you could set up, I love talking to graduate students. So if there's any opportunity to talk to people and see if they, like I said, I present this at national conferences and people don't dispute what I'm saying. They just keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
But I think we need to reach this next generation, and, eventually these old guys will flush out,
Oh, definitely. And like you said, it takes somebody to come in and shake the industry up, and sometimes it takes somebody that's like you said, a younger generation to really shake it up, because you really have to think about it. If what we're doing here in America, we're seeing overseas what they're doing in places like China and places of Asia, and how they're using public transportation on top of their infrastructure, and they're pretty much building cities in a year, right? Yeah. I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day, but I think there's a Chinese city somewhere over there that probably pretty close, right? So, John, do you have a question for Mr. Marshall? I know you, you got out the hospital bed to join us today.
Yeah, what a great discussion. I was a little bit curious about how you first got into this, how you transitioned. Was that right after graduate school? How long have you been doing this modeling?
Yeah, my graduate program was really pretty general, and I was doing a lot of work in energy back then but then I was at this firm that kind of spun off of my graduate program. My master's was from Dartmouth, and there was a firm which is right across the river here in New Hampshire. And I was actually doing energy projects and some other kinds of projects, and then started doing transportation. I found it really interesting because it's such a high leverage point. But again, my modeling background was more general. I wasn't just immediately focused on that. And I started doing building these models for smaller cities, and kind of learning how they were used and then I started questioning some of what was going on. And then partly because we were a small firm, I started taking on work for environmental groups and looking at it from the other side. Well, what if you wanted to critique them? And so it's just kind of one thing led to another. And then eventually, more recently, the dynamic modeling is something that hasn't been available that long. It's a little bit more computer intensive. So that I didn't come on until a few years ago. But I for a long time, I was aware of the problems with the current methods.
And at a certain point, you had to change directions, right? Because you couldn't keep working for the same firm that was working for the Department of Transportation. And so did you have to create?
Yeah, well, I did create a new company, but it's funny, I still have about half of my billings for the public sector. It's about half and half. I have more projects for nonprofits because they tend to be less money. But I do a lot of work for city governments. It's just the state departments of transportation I don't work for much, because what they do, and it's through this group I mentioned, AASHTO, they've created these standards that are basically rural freeway standards, and they want to apply them right through the city. And so there often is a tension between the city and the state. And so I will work for cities, and sometimes against states, and sometimes just on their own planning. For example, I'm starting a project in Newport, Rhode Island, where it's primarily just about their own transportation master plan. They do have to interact with highways, so there may be something that could come up, some kind of conflict that might come up. But I do a lot of work for cities. I do work for metropolitan planning organizations, like the one you mentioned there. Recently did one. Again, they tend to be the smaller ones. I did one recently in Casper, Wyoming.
Well, Norm,
Long-term plan.
yeah, I would just a thought, but it feels like we're on the verge of getting a statewide network of groups like our Allendale Strong group. We've connected with one of the leaders in New Orleans, or the leader in New Orleans, working for the teardown of I-10 over Claiborne Avenue. And there's a group in Lafayette, and there may be a group in Monroe, Louisiana. So we've gotten some advice that a path to change would be to request a governor's task force on the DOT policy change. And just wonder if you might have any thoughts there, because I can see how your knowledge could be a key part of a task force like that, and really confronting, particularly if we can get reform-minded people as the weighted portion of that kind of a task force.
Yeah, I think that's an intriguing idea. I can't think that I've been involved with anything quite like that. You would want to get the right people, and you want to make sure they had the right mission, the right, their purview was wide enough to accomplish what was needed.
Yeah. Well, it is real interesting, and there's so many arguments. One of the biggest ones we have in Louisiana is that this little 3.5 billion freeway just goes into the list of Louisiana's has a deficit of maintenance, or a backlog of maintenance, of about 14 or 15 billion dollars. And then the legislators have lined up another 15 billion of unfunded mega projects like this little stretch of I-49. And it's like, we can't keep doing that.
No. Chuck Maroon does a great job. He's been writing, I know you follow him, so you've probably been seeing him rant about the infrastructure bill.
Yeah.
And I haven't gotten into the details the way he has, but it is a real issue. I mean, his point is that every project ought to pay for itself. I mean, it should eventually, obviously not up front, but it should be justified through a return on investment.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
Well, a lot of the infrastructure bill that I've read, I haven't went over wholly myself yet. But as far as the transportation portion of it, it's one of the things that me and John and probably everybody in our group has preached is repair first.
Yes.
Repair what we've built already, and then let's move on to after we've repaired, then we can think about building more. But a lot of but just like someone said, I watched somebody on the news say, that's not pretty. You can't go to your constituents and say, hey, look at this brand new thing I repaired, right? That's not pretty, that's not beautiful, even though people like to drive on great roads and things like that. You just can't. A lot of times politicians want to show you the big, shiny, new, huge thing with their name on it. And I know that was just an article in the Shreveport Times that talked about how much people spend on repairs. They said, I think it was around $2,300 a year that people spend on repairs from the bad infrastructure that is in Louisiana. And funny, they said that Shreveport had one of the lowest congestion costs in the state. All right.
Yeah.
Everywhere else. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was skimming the long-range plan, which just got approved this month, actually in April. You have a new long-range plan, and there's a little sentence in there. I didn't look at it carefully, but it says, level of service. Well, it's different here than it would be in, Houston or Dallas. People have local standards. Therefore, even if it's not bad, it's bad here. That's sort of that's the theme in the MPO.
I mean, just one quick question, because I know we're coming up on an hour. What do you see? I know you've worked all over the place, and you've been on many roads, and you've seen many highways and streets and things like that. What is the consensus of, I guess, the decision makers versus the people that are actually driving versus the actual infrastructure? What has been that one thing that you have seen consistently being the problem, city after city, and build after build, as far as people thinking about the infrastructure that needs repair versus this shiny new highway? What's been that consistent feel? Do people love the big shiny new highway, or are they like, well, I'll sacrifice that for the repair?
I think nobody likes congestion, and congestion in areas that aren't that congested can just mean there's a car in front of you.
Yeah.
It doesn't even mean you're not moving very much. It kind of means there's a car in front of you. So they always get sucked into the idea, if you just added more lanes, I'll be able to move faster. And in most areas these days, it's not so much a new road, because for the most part, people aren't even trying that anymore. It's gotten too hard to build new roads. So you're kind of at the tail end there, unfortunately for you. But the widening is very much the case. And the widening is just endless. You widen, and then what happens is, you can, like you say, widen a 5-mile section, and then the next 5-mile section has to be widened, and so forth and so on. Then you have to go back and widen the original one. We have to rebuild the interchange, and it's just a never-ending process. And that's kind of what I talk about in some of those videos, is that you never really, but that's a complex system thing where people don't understand. They think that the widening will solve the problem, even though it doesn't, and hasn't. And I know in the videos I go back 80 years that it hasn't been solving the problem. You just can't point to the place where it has solved the problem. You can point to dozens of places where it hasn't solved the problem. So widening is the battle in most areas. But it does apply to the new road too. And I think in terms of the, not quite within reach, but I have a stack of Roads and Bridges magazines, and it's all this, it's sort of like engineering porn that's on the cover. There's all these multi-level interchanges and so forth. So if you're like a DOT engineer, you want to get on the cover of that magazine. You want your project to be featured, and so some of this human nature is just so basic. I mean, that's but I'm not sure the public cares so much. I think the public just thinks that I don't like being stuck in traffic, and give me some more road in front of me.
Just that, you're right. It's human nature, I guess, is why we have these solutions that don't work. But I saw something the other day that in Shreveport, the average car owner is spending about $2,000 a year on maintenance of their vehicles, that is really caused by the potholes and lack of maintenance on our local street grid. And they haven't associated the fact with, we prioritize freeway spending, therefore we don't have enough money to spend on our streets. And then also, as we've learned from you, that the street grid will solve the congestion problem if you quit widening roads.
Yeah, I don't know why that message about maintenance doesn't get through better than it does, although I've seen surveys done. I don't know if they've done any. Sometimes the MPOs will do surveys, and maintenance tends to rate really high when you ask people, to prioritize in a survey.
Yeah.
So that's something you could see if the MPO is done, and in theory, a group like yours could try to do something like a survey like that too.
Okay.
Maintenance tends to show up high, and obviously it needs to be communicated even better than it is. But I think people do have some sense that that's important. It's just, it doesn't get to be part of that. I think your point is that they're not making the trade-off. They're not saying I can't have maintenance and I have to choose. They're not making that choice.
Yeah. It really is an entitlement mindset that, you know, we can have whatever we want. We don't have to worry about cost. And my view, and straighten me out if I'm wrong, but that goes back to the federal government saying we'll pay for 90% of the cost of these roadways that are going to destroy your city.
Yeah, that's been an historic problem. Yeah, definitely. The funding has been a big problem.
Yeah. So we're very, very happy to have you on today. And it's, this is a moment for all of us. We've watched all your videos. We've, read all of your bios. And we also, I know all of us probably find ourselves going to the Congress of New Urbanism website a lot. So we are very happy to have you on today. Do you have any last words, anything you want to put out there? Do you have any projects you want to talk about on your website? Just go ahead and let us know.
No, not really. I'd encourage people to go watch the videos. I hope they are educational, and I certainly can take feedback about them too. I did it because I do get I get a request every few weeks from somebody like you, and I always sort of send them there first and say, okay, last week it was somebody from Cincinnati. I said, go look at that, and then we'll talk on the phone. I just figure it sort of speeds up my conversation a lot. So I encourage people to do that and learn as much as you can and be skeptical. Because don't believe what they're telling you.
All right. So I will make sure that when we put it out there, I'll make sure that we have links and everything available, so people can go look at your videos and probably and also even go to your website. And I know you have links on your website that to your YouTube video. So if you see an uptick of about 10 or 20 videos, that's us.
Yeah,
so.
It is fun it is fun when I can see, like when I've been to a conference or something, because I'm obviously not I haven't gone viral yet, but I can see little ripples when I'm out there.
Well, I tell you, it was really fun to do our last 3 meetings, which are put in the notes, about an hour and a half long, and just to play 2 at a time, and then let people talk about what they got out of it. And I thought that was pretty cool. Just to,
if you have feedback at some point, I may feel like I would try and update some of them, but
okay,
I'd appreciate any feedback you have.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Marshall, for checking us out today, hanging out with us and teaching us a little bit more about traffic modeling. And, we leave today just a little bit smarter about transportation. Thank you.
Well, I've enjoyed it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to thank everybody else for coming in today. Kim, Dorothy, John, Mr. Miracle himself.
I know.
I want to thank you guys for hanging out with us and coming in today for this special learning and doing episode of the Allendale Drone podcast. We're going to do this a little bit more and like you said, we want to get the message out, and we want to teach people, and we want to learn ourselves. So thank you guys for hanging out with us today also.
It was fun.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So once again, I want to thank everybody that's watching on YouTube. I want to thank everybody that is listening today on our podcast. We are everywhere that you check out podcasts. Check out the Allendale Strong podcast. We have just been approved for Pandora today. Yay! Right, we're on Pandora now. So that's another place you can check us out, our podcast. Once again, if you're checking out anywhere you see our website or on YouTube, go down below, check out Norm Marshall's video. It was very informative, and you will learn something that day. All right, and we want to thank everybody that's listening, thank everybody that's watching. Please like and subscribe, and have a wonderful day.